The light above the whiteboard had been flickering for 6 weeks. Not in a dramatic way. Not the kind of flickering that made people look up. Just a small, slow stutter every 40 seconds or so, like a tired eye trying to stay open. Nora Callahan had counted the intervals once, back in the 3rd week, because the essay prompt on the board was boring, and counting was something to do with her brain, while her hand wrote things it didn't need her full attention to write. The prompt was still boring. The essay was 2 pages in and going nowhere good. She clicked her pen against her back teeth and stared at the sentence she had just written. It was a bad sentence. It said something true in the least interesting way possible, which was, in her opinion, a kind of lying. She crossed it out, started again. Behind her, a kid named Derek was explaining to his neighbor why a specific digital coin was about to be worth a lot of money. His neighbor, a girl named Becca, had stopped responding 4 minutes ago and was drawing a very detailed horse in her notebook margin. Derek had not noticed. Paige Dunmore was 2 seats to Nora's left, leaning sideways across the aisle, with her hand deep in someone else's bag, pulling out a wrapped granola bar with the focused energy of someone defusing a bomb. "That's mine," the bag's owner said. "You weren't eating it," Paige said, and unwrapped it. Owen Briggs was at the front of the room, sitting on the edge of his desk, the way teachers sit when they want you to think the class is casual, reading something on his laptop and drinking his coffee. The coffee was from the machine in the staff room. Everyone knew it tasted like hot sadness. Owen drank it anyway, every single day, with an expression that suggested he had made peace with worse things. The kind of warm that made eyelids heavy after lunch. Nora crossed out her second sentence too. She reached into her left pocket out of habit. An unconscious reach, like checking a clock, and touched the 3 pens she kept there. 2 black, 1 blue. She had picked the blue one up off the hallway floor 3 weeks ago, outside the library, where someone had dropped it and kept walking. It was a nice pen. Brushed metal barrel, heavier than it looked. She kept meaning to turn it into the front office. She kept forgetting. She put her hand back on her essay. The light flickered. 40 seconds, right on schedule. Then the windows went dark. Not dim, dark. The kind of dark that has weight behind it, like something had pressed itself against the glass from the outside. A shadow with edges, solid, not moving. Nora looked up. So did Owen. His head came up from his laptop, and he looked at the windows, and his face did something. It was a small thing, hard to catch if you weren't paying attention. His expression didn't break into fear or confusion the way everyone else's did a half-second later when the sound started. It went still, deliberate, like a man recognizing something he had hoped he wouldn't have to recognize. Nora filed that away. The sound came through the floor before it came through the air. A deep, low tone that bypassed ears entirely and went straight to the chest, the ribs, the back teeth. Not loud, just everywhere at once. The kind of sound that made the body pay attention before the mind had any idea why. Every phone in the room went dark at the same moment. Not one by one, all of them, like something had reached through the air and turned them off the way you turn off a light. The overhead flickered twice fast. Went out. For 3 seconds the classroom was dim, lit only by the gray non-light pushing around the edges of whatever was pressed against the windows. People looked at their phones, looked at each other. Someone said, "What the?" and didn't finish it. Then the hallway door opened. What came through it was not a person. It was tall, 7 feet or close to it, wide at the shoulder in a way that made the door frame look like it had been designed wrong. The surface of it, skin or armor or something in between, was the color old rust, plated in overlapping sections that caught the gray light and gave nothing back. It moved like something that had never needed to be quiet about how much space it took up. It was followed by 2 more, then another 2. Then 1 more, behind them, 6 total. They moved to positions around the room with a precision that had clearly been planned somewhere else, in a place where the layout of this classroom had already been studied. 2 near the door, 2 flanking the windows, 1 at the back wall, 1 at the front. Nobody screamed. That came later. Right now the room was in that particular suspended silence that happens in the gap between something occurring and the brain catching up to what it means. Owen stood up from his desk, slowly, both hands visible. Nora noticed that too. The one at the front, the largest one, the rust-colored wall with the device bolted to its throat like a second collar, stepped forward. The device clicked, warmed up. When it spoke, the sound it made through the translator was like gravel being processed through something mechanical, each word arriving slightly behind where it should have been, as if language was a thing it was tolerating rather than using. We require the one who holds the original document. That was it. That was all it said. Nobody in the room moved. Nobody breathed loud enough to matter. Derek had stopped talking about coins. Becca's pen had gone still over the horse drawing. Paige had a granola bar halfway to her mouth and had forgotten about it completely. Nora looked around the room the way she always looked around her room, quickly, cataloging, the same scan she used at the start of a debate round to read the judges. 6 soldiers, 1 exit door, 2 near it, windows dark and covered. Owen standing with his hands open, his face doing that careful, controlled thing. She looked down at her left pocket. Paige grabbed her arm. The kind of grip that would leave a mark. Nora looked at Paige's face. Paige was scared in the loud, honest way that Paige was scared of things. Eyes wide, jaw tight. She was staring at Nora's left hand. Nora looked down at her own hand. She had reached into her pocket again without realizing it. She was holding the blue pen, the heavy one, the one from the hallway floor. It was uncapped. Her thumb was resting on the clip, the way it always rested there when she was thinking. She didn't know why that felt like something. She stood there in the gray half-dark, with a pen in her hand, and 6 alien soldiers arranged around the room, and a teacher at the front who was being too calm in a way that was its own kind of information. And outside the windows something massive and solid and not from here, pressed against the glass and blocked out the sky. The light had stopped flickering. It was just off now. Put it back in her pocket. Kept her hand there. She looked at Owen. He was already looking at her. The school had 43 students in it at the time of what the news would later call, with impressive inadequacy, the incident. 6 teachers. 1 guidance counselor named Mr. Pete, who had been in the middle of eating a sandwich at his desk, and had, by all accounts, remained in that position for the duration of what followed, which was either cowardice or a very reasonable assessment of his options. Outside, in the parking lot, 3 military vehicles had arrived within 11 minutes of the ship appearing over the school. This was fast enough that someone somewhere had known something was coming. General Cole Hargrove stood on the asphalt with a radio in one hand and a look on his face like a man doing very complicated arithmetic in his head and not liking any of the answers. A media van had pulled up on the street before the second military vehicle had even parked. That detail would bother people for a long time afterward. Inside, the 6 alien soldiers held their positions. They hadn't touched anyone. That was the strange part. The part that was worse than if they had been breaking things somehow, because broken things made sense. This was orderly, geometric. Each soldier stood where they had placed themselves when they entered, and they stayed there with a stillness that made the room feel like the inside of something that had already been decided. One of them, the one posted near the back wall, had a device on its wrist, about the size of a thick cuff, that it was pointing slowly around the room. Not at people, at the air, at the walls, scanning something, recording something. Nora watched it make one full rotation of the room and then start again. The one at the front, the large one with the translator at its throat, had said its single sentence, and then gone quiet. It stood there and waited in the way that only things with a lot of patience or a lot of certainty can wait, without any sign of doubt that the waiting would eventually produce what it wanted. Vreth. That was what Owen called it, 10 minutes in, after he had been standing at the front of the room, in quiet conversation with the alien, for long enough that the room had settled from rigid fear into a lower, duller kind of dread. He came back to his desk and sat down slowly and looked at the room. He picked up his coffee, put it back down without drinking it. "Stay calm," he said. "They aren't here to hurt anyone." "You know that for sure?" Derek said, which was the most useful thing Derek had said all day. "Not for sure," Owen said, with the honesty of a man who had decided a long time ago that false comfort was a waste of everyone's time. "But their formation is containment, not aggression. There's a difference." From 2 rows over, and 1 row back, Nora was watching Owen's face. She had been watching it since he stood up from his desk, the moment the windows went dark. There was something in the way he held himself, not tense exactly, but ready in a specific, trained way, that did not match the person who spent his days arguing about the causes of the First World War with teenagers who didn't care. Owen caught her looking. He moved along the row of desks with the slow, casual walk of a teacher returning a stack of papers, nothing alarming about it, and sat himself down sideways in the empty desk next to hers. He didn't look at her directly. He looked at the front of the room, at Vreth, and he barely moved his mouth when he spoke. "Don't correct me," he said quietly. "Don't explain. Don't react. Do you have something on you that isn't yours?" Nora's hand moved to her left pocket before she could stop it. Owen's eyes tracked the movement. He said nothing. "A pen," she said, the same low register he was using. "I found it in the hallway 3 weeks ago, outside the library. Someone dropped it." "What does it look like?" "Metal, brushed silver, no brand name on it. Heavier than it should be for its size." Owen was quiet for a moment, still looking at the front of the room. "Okay," he said. That was all. He got up and walked back to his desk. Paige had been watching the exchange with the expression of someone watching a car drive slowly toward a wall. When Nora looked at her, she leaned across the aisle as far as she could without standing, and whispered, "It's the pen, isn't it? It's always the pen with you. Why is it always something you found?" "I don't know that it's the pen," Nora said. "Your face says it's the pen." "My face doesn't say anything." "Your face says everything," Paige said. "You just can't see your own face." Nora put her hand flat on her desk, said nothing. Outside, Hargrove was on his 3rd radio call. The transmissions were encrypted and short and getting shorter, which meant the people above him were giving him less to work with and more to be responsible for. He had a shooter positioned on the roof of the building across the street, a precaution that nobody had officially authorized and nobody was officially denying. He had a window of about 40 minutes before the story on the media van's camera became a story with footage, and after that his options would narrow in ways he didn't want to think about. He needed the building cleared. He needed it cleared without starting something that couldn't be stopped. He had no idea what was inside that building that could help him do that. He did not know about Nora Callahan yet. Back inside the classroom, Owen had gotten Vreth to speak again. It had taken patient, quiet effort, the kind of effort that looked, from across the room, like 2 people simply standing near each other in uncomfortable silence. Owen asked questions in a low voice. Vreth answered through the translator in that gravel and machinery sound that hit the air like stones dropped into still water. Owen came back to the desk next to Nora a second time. His expression had done something new. It was the face of a man who had just been given information that answered several questions he had, and created several he hadn't thought to ask. "The pen isn't a pen," he said. He said it like a plain fact. No drama, no emphasis. "What is it?" Nora said. "A record. Diplomatic. Encoded in the barrel somehow. I don't understand the technical part of it. It was taken from an alien delegation about 6 months ago, at a meeting that the public was told was a weather satellite." Nora looked at the front of the room. Vreth had not moved. The soldier with the wrist scanner was on its 4th rotation. "They came here for a pen I found on the floor," she said. "They tracked the signal from it. It's been through 14 sets of hands since it was stolen, apparently. You're the current holder." "I found it on the floor. I understand that. I was going to turn it into the front office. I understand that too." Nora was quiet for a moment. She was looking at her left pocket. Then she looked at Owen. "What happens if I give it back?" Owen hesitated. "One beat. "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said. "Because outside, there's a general who has already decided the answer to that question is no." He got up and walked back to his desk. Nora sat with her hand on her pocket. The pen was there, cool and solid through the fabric, heavier than it should be. Vreth's second-in-command, the one posted near the back wall, had stopped scanning. It was looking at Nora, not moving, not raising a weapon, just looking, with the flat, total attention of something that had just found what it came for. Nora didn't look away. She didn't look away from a lot of things. It was one of the only tricks she knew. Owen's emergency radio crackled to life 20 minutes into the standoff. He kept it in his desk drawer, which was already an unusual thing for a history teacher to own. It was a military-grade channel device, compact and battered, and held together on one corner with a strip of black tape. He pulled it out slowly, visibly, making sure Vreth's soldiers could see it was not a weapon, and held it to his ear with both hands open. The voice on the other end was General Hargroves. Short sentences, clipped. The kind of voice that had been in enough rooms where decisions got made to know how to sound like the decision was already final. "Do not relinquish any objects," Hargrove said. "Whatever they are asking for, the answer is no. Hold position. We have assets in place." "Assets in place." Owen glanced at Nora. His expression gave nothing away. He responded in single syllables and put the radio back in the drawer. Nora had heard enough. She knew what assets in place meant. She had paid enough attention in this specific class, in this specific room, across an entire school year of Owen Briggs walking up and down between the desks, explaining exactly what happened when people in rooms like this made that particular kind of decision. She knew what it had cost before. She could work out what it would cost here. She looked at the pen in her hand. She had taken it out without thinking about it again. She did that. It was a reflex, like how some people crack their knuckles when they were working something out. The sound was very small in the quiet room. Vreth's second-in-command turned its head. Nora uncapped the pen and held it up, high enough and clear enough that the soldier near the back wall could see it, and she said in the voice she used when she was opening a round, not loud, but directed, aimed like something thrown, "I want to talk to the commander, directly." The room went a different kind of still. Paige's hand found her arm under the desk, and squeezed once, hard, and let go. Owen turned from the front of the room. His mouth was flat. He looked at Nora for a long moment, with the expression of someone watching a bridge being walked across before the structural report is in. Then he nodded, once, and turned back to Vreth. There was a short exchange. Vreth's translator clicked and warmed. He looked at Nora across the room. A full, slow look. The kind that took inventory. And then he made a short sound that the translator rendered as approach. Nora stood up. She walked to the front of the room. She was 5 feet 4 inches tall in shoes. She had a debate team hoodie on over a t-shirt, and her hair was in the kind of ponytail that happened when you didn't think about it. She was holding a pen, She walked the way she always walked to the front of a round. Steady, not slow. Like she had already thought about all the ways this could go, and had decided on one. Vreth was a wall. Not like the walls of the room. Like something the room was built around. He was rust-colored and wide, and the translator at his throat made a faint warm hum when she got close. She looked up at him, the way you look up at the scoreboard before the final round. Factual, noting the number, not scared of it. She did not look scared. She was something tighter and more focused than scared. She was in the argument. She was already in it. I found this pen on the floor outside the library 3 weeks ago, she said. I didn't know what it was. I still don't fully understand what it is. But I understand that it belongs to you, and that there are people outside this building right now who have decided I shouldn't give it back. The translator processed. Vreth was still, waiting. I'm going to tell you what I think, she said, and then I'm going to give you the pen, and then this is going to be over. A sound came out of Vreth that might have been something like interest. She chose to treat it that way. She went through it the way she went through any argument, clear, ordered, no decoration. Point 1. She found the pen. She did not steal it, buy it, or receive it. Finding an object on a public floor is not possession in any legal or diplomatic sense she knew of. And she was willing to bet it wasn't in theirs either. Point 2. Returning stolen diplomatic property was not surrender or weakness. It was the documented mechanism by which conflicts between parties had been de-escalated throughout every period of human history she had studied in the room they were currently standing in. She cited 3 examples. Owen, behind her and to her left, made a sound that was not quite a word. Point 3. The people outside the building, who had decided the pen should not be returned, had made that decision with bad information, and a time pressure that was making them reach for the wrong tool. That was a human problem. She was not interested in dying because of someone else's bad information. So, she said, I'm going to give you the pen, not because you scared me into it, because it's yours, and because I have read enough history in this room to know what the other choice looks like. She held it out. Vreth did not take it immediately. He looked at her for a long time, long enough that she felt the weight of it. The translator clicked and hummed. His second-in-command had gone completely still. Every soldier in the room was in the same position they had been in for the last 40 minutes. And for the first time since they entered, that stillness felt like something other than threat. Then Vreth reached out. His hand was large enough to hold her whole forearm if he wanted to. He took the pen from her with 2 fingers, carefully, the way you take something you have been looking for a long time, and know the value of. He looked at it. He looked at her. You argue, he said through the translator, like someone who has lost before. Nora looked at him. I debate competitively, she said. It's basically the same thing. Outside the ship powered down 1 level. Not all the way. 1 degree like a held breath let out halfway. The dark pressing against the windows shifted and thinned. A little gray light came back into the room. Nora turned around. The room was staring at her. 30-something students and a handful of teachers in a classroom that smelled like old carpet and bad coffee and someone's leftover lunch. All of them looking at her like they were trying to work out what they had just seen. Paige was crying. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that happened when the feeling was too big for sound. She was sitting with her hand over her mouth, and her eyes were very bright, and she was looking at Nora like she was furious and relieved, and something else there was no easy name for. Nora looked at her. She looked at the overhead light. It had come back on. It wasn't flickering anymore. It was just on, steady and plain, lighting the room the way it had been lighting the room since September, on the days it worked. She stood there and looked at the steady light. She had the urge to say something, and she didn't say it, and that felt right. The room was still. The kind of still that comes after, not before. She went back to her seat. She put her hands flat on her desk. She looked at her essay. Still there, still bad, still unfinished. 2 pages of sentences she'd crossed out. Paige reached over and grabbed her hand under the desk and held it. The alien soldiers left the way they had come in. Same formation, same geometric precision, same unhurried, deliberate movement, like a tide going back out. One by one they cleared the doorframe, and the hallway swallowed them, and then the sound came again, the deep chest tone, the floor vibration, but receding now, pulling away from the building, like a sound on a string being reeled in. Vreth went last. He paused at the door. He did not look back at Nora. He looked at Owen, and he made a sound without using the translator. Raw sound, in his own language, guttural and brief, 4 syllables that landed in the room and stayed there. Owen went very still. Then Vreth was gone. For a moment, nobody moved. Then someone started crying loudly from the back row, which seemed to give everyone else permission, and the room became noise, voices on top of voices, chairs scraping, phones being pulled out and discovered to be working again, a rush of texting and calling, and someone trying to open the window that was painted shut and had always been painted shut. Owen stood at the front of the room and let it happen. He just stood there with both hands loose at his sides, watching the door the soldiers had walked out of. And his face was doing the careful, private thing it did when he was holding something back. Outside in the parking lot, things were moving fast in the wrong directions. General Hargrove had received a radio call that he would later describe in official documentation as a significant update in the operational picture. What it was, in plain terms, was a call from someone above him telling him that the pen had been relinquished and the ship was withdrawing, and the shooter on the roof across the street needed to stand down immediately. Hargrove stood on the asphalt and listened to the call. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said "understood" in the voice of a man who did not, in fact, fully understand, and went to go find out who had made the decision he had specifically ordered no one to make. The media van on the street had its camera out. It had been out since before the military vehicles arrived. The footage it was capturing was not of the soldiers, or the ship, or Hargrove's face. It was of the school building itself, wide and steady. And there was already a blurry image circulating on 2 social media platforms of the hallway inside, caught through the narrow window in the door by a camera that had no business having that kind of zoom. In the image, if you knew what to look for, you could see a girl standing at the front of a classroom. Paige saw the image on her phone while she was still sitting at her desk, 40 seconds after her phone came back to life. "Nora," she said. "I know," Nora said. She hadn't looked at her phone yet. "You're already on the internet." "I know, Paige. There are 3 people in my contacts asking if that's you." "I know, Paige." Ate the last of the granola bar in one bite, and said nothing else. The debrief happened in the parking lot, under a sky that had returned to being a normal sky, flat gray and featureless, the ship gone to wherever ships like that go when they are done with the place. 2 Army officers pulled Nora aside within 4 minutes of the students being led outside. They had notebooks and expressions that had been professionally arranged to look neutral. A 3rd person stood slightly behind them, a woman in plain clothes, no badge visible, no introduction given, holding a small device and taking very precise notes in a way that suggested the notes were going somewhere specific. Nora answered every question factually. She said what she had found, where she had found it, how long she had had it. She said what she had said to Vreth, point by point, in the same order she had said it. She did not add to it, or explain it differently, or soften any part of it. She had found a pen on the floor. She had given it back. That was the whole of it. The woman with no name asked, at the end, in a voice that was carefully not leading, "Were you afraid?" Nora thought about it. I was annoyed, she said. I had an essay due. One of the army officers made a sound that might have been a laugh, suppressed fast. The woman with no name wrote something down without any visible reaction. Hargrove found Owen near the edge of the parking lot, away from the students, standing with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the empty sky where the ship had been. They had a short conversation that nobody else could hear. At one point, Hargrove's voice got low and direct, and Owen shook his head once, slow and clear. The way you shake your head when the answer is no, and will stay no, regardless of how many times the question is asked. Whatever Vreth had said at the door, in those 4 syllables without the translator, Owen was not translating it for a general today. Hargrove stared at him for a moment. Then he walked away. Paige had found her way to the low concrete wall at the edge of the parking lot, the one students sat on in the 10 minutes between buses, and she was sitting there, watching the sky with the expression of someone who had just watched something enormous happen, and was still working out how to file it in her brain. She had someone else's jacket on. She was eating someone else's bag of chips. She looked philosophical about the whole situation in the specific way that only happened after the alternative had been screaming. Nora came and sat next to her. The sky was just sky, gray and regular, the kind of sky that covered this part of the state for most of October. Cars in the parking lot, a teacher she didn't know, talking on the phone with one hand pressed over her other ear. Somewhere on the street, the media van's camera was still running. Nora put her hand in her left pocket. She sat there for a moment, with her fingers in the pocket. 2 pens, black ones, both hers, both belonging there. She had started the morning with 3. That landed somewhere in her chest in a way she didn't have a word for. Not grief exactly, not loss, something smaller and stranger. The particular specific weight of a thing that was gone and would keep being gone. She sat on the wall with her hand in her pocket and looked at the regular sky, and let that sit. Paige finished the chips, folded the bag into a neat small square, the way she always did when she was thinking, and looked at the side of Nora's face. "You okay?" Paige said. Nora looked at the sky. "Yeah," she said. "You sure?" "Ask me again tomorrow," Nora said. Paige nodded. That was good enough. That was the kind of answer that deserved to be left alone. She put the folded chip bag in her own pocket and sat with Nora on the wall, and neither of them said anything else for a while. Above them, the school sign had lost 2 of its plastic letters in the chaos, the way it always lost letters when anything bumped the frame. It now read something that was not what it was supposed to say. Neither of them looked at it. The sky held nothing. The sky was just sky. For now, that was enough. 3 weeks later, the light above the whiteboard was fixed. Someone in maintenance had finally come and replaced the tube, and now it burned clean and steady, the way it was supposed to burn, filling the front of the classroom with flat, even light that made everything look exactly like what it was. Nora noticed it every time she walked in. The noticing was getting smaller, but it hadn't stopped. The news had moved on to other things, the way the news moved on. Her name had been in 2 news cycles and 1 congressional briefing that she was told about only because someone had to notify her that she had been named in it. Not to testify, just named, mentioned, a detail in something larger. A girl who had made a choice in a classroom that had made another choice possible somewhere else. The review period that Vreth's departure had started was now technically a negotiation. There were people in rooms, people with titles and schedules and prepared statements, doing the slow, bureaucratic work of talking through something that had almost become a different kind of story. Nora did not know the details. Nobody had briefed her. She had a feeling nobody would. She was back in AP History, 2 weeks past the incident, working on a new essay that was also going nowhere good. and the class was its usual noise. Derek had moved on from coins to something involving an app. Becca was drawing horses again in the margin. Paige was sitting at her desk, actually taking notes for the first time in recent memory, which was its own kind of sign that something had shifted. Owen was at the front of the room, on the edge of his desk, drinking the terrible coffee. Everything the same. Not the same. The bell rang. The room emptied with the usual rush of bags being zipped and chairs being pushed back. She let the room clear around her, the way she sometimes let silence clear around her in a round, waiting until the space settled before she used it. Paige paused at the door and looked back at her. Nora tipped her head toward the hallway. Go ahead. Paige gave her a long look, the kind of look that meant she had opinions she was choosing to keep to herself, which was rare enough to be notable, and left. The room was empty. Just Nora and Owen and the fixed light. Owen was still sitting on his desk. He had the coffee in both hands, looking at it, like he was reading something in it that wasn't in any hurry to come clear. Nora picked up her bag, stood up, crossed the room to the front. What did he say, she said, at the door, when he left, the thing you said to Hargrove you weren't going to translate. Owen looked up from his coffee. He looked at her for a long moment. The one she had watched him use the day of the standoff, when he was making decisions about what to say and what to hold. Then he set the coffee down. Sit down, he said. She sat in the front row desk, the one closest to his, and waited. Owen was quiet for a moment. He looked at the whiteboard, at the steady light, at his hands. In Vreth's dialect, he said, there isn't a direct translation for what he said. His language doesn't work the way ours does. Some things map over, and some things don't. But you understood it. I understood enough of it, he said. I've studied 6 languages, 3 of them military context. The other 3 because I couldn't stop. A pause. His language has a phrase. It sits between 2 things, a military salutation and an academic honorific. It's the thing they say to someone on the opposing side who argued well enough that the argument itself changed something. Nora waited. The closest it gets in English, Owen said, is something like, we will remember that you had words. The room was quiet. The light was steady. Outside, down the hallway, someone was running, even though the rule was no running in the hallway. And the footsteps went past and faded, and the quiet came back. Nora sat with that. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was looking at her own hands on the desk, the way she sometimes looked at her hands when she was holding an argument in her head and turning it over. The pen, she said, what was actually in it? Owen leaned back on his desk. What I've been able to piece together, he said carefully, is that about 6 months ago there was a meeting. A real one, not the weather satellite story. Early talks, before anything formal. And it went badly. A pause. Not because anyone was violent, because there was evidence presented at that meeting that suggested humans had been acting in bad faith, working against the possibility of agreement. The pen had the record of that meeting encoded in it. And someone stole it. Someone took it, Owen said, before it could be submitted as formal evidence. Without that record, without the proof, the alien faction that was pushing for a peaceful resolution had nothing solid to stand on. The faction pushing for escalation had everything. Nora was quiet. So when I gave it back, she said, the peacekeeping faction got their evidence back, Owen said. They had something to argue with. That's why the review period started. That's why the negotiation is happening now. Nora sat with that. She hadn't saved anything with courage or force or dramatic sacrifice. She had found something on the floor that wasn't hers. She had held on to it because she kept forgetting to turn it in. And then when the moment came, she had given it back because it was the right call. Because she had read enough history to know what the other call looked like. Because she was someone who could not let herself walk away from a problem once she had the threat of it in her hand. That was the whole thing. That was all of it. Owen looked at her. Not the careful teacher look. Something quieter. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah," she said. "If you had known," he said, "if someone had told you that morning what was in the pen and what returning it would do, would you have done the same thing?" Nora looked at her hands. She thought about it honestly, the way she tried to think about hard questions when nobody was grading the answer. She thought about Hargrove's voice on the radio, saying hold position. She thought about the shooter on the roof she hadn't known about until after. She thought about what it felt like to stand in front of Vreth and find that the fear was there, but the argument was louder. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her left pocket. She pulled out a pen, one of the black ones. She set it on the desk between them, flat and plain, like a period at the end of a sentence. "I would have argued better," she said. Owen looked at the pen on the desk. Then he laughed. A real one. The kind that started somewhere it had been kept, and came out a little surprised at itself. It lasted only a moment, but it was real the whole time. He picked up his coffee, looked at it, put it back down. "Debate semifinals are in 2 weeks," he said, sliding back into the voice he used when the moment was closing and the ordinary world was resuming. "You should probably work on your essay." "The prompt is bad," she said. "The prompt is fine." "The prompt assumes a conclusion," she said. "Everything assumes a conclusion," he said. "Your job is to complicate it." Nora picked up her pen from the desk, stood up, shouldered her bag. She looked at the steady light above the whiteboard. "Yeah," she said, "I know." She walked to the door, down the hallway where someone had been running, out through the main doors, into the flat gray October sky, where the air was cold and sharp, and the parking lot was ordinary, and the street was just a street. The sky held nothing unusual. The sky was just sky. Somewhere in it, things were being decided. Words were being said in rooms she would never enter, about futures she would never be told about, by people with titles and schedules and prepared statements. The machine of it was running. It was running partly because of a pen she had found on the floor and given back to the person it belonged to. She clicked her pen twice, kept walking.